Hello everyone, and welcome to our channel, where we dive deep into the fascinating world of the Middle Ages. When you hear that term, what comes to mind? Is it towering castles, knights in shining armor, or epic battles for glory and honor? While those are definitely part of the picture, the reality for most people was something entirely different. Today we're going to peel back the layers of Romanticism and explore what daily life was truly like for the everyday person during this incredible 1,000-year period. So grab a cup of your favorite beverage, get comfortable, and let's travel back in time together. First, let's get our timeline straight. The Middle Ages, or the medieval period, is a huge chunk of history, stretching roughly from the 5th century to the 15th century. To make sense of it all, historians usually split it into three parts: the early, high, and late Middle Ages. Life wasn't static, it changed dramatically over these centuries. The world of a farmer in 800 AD was vastly different from that of a merchant in 1400 AD. So keep in mind that we're painting with a broad brush today, but we'll try to highlight some of those changes along the way. Let's start with the foundation of medieval society. The feudal system. Imagine a giant pyramid. At the very top was the king, who technically owned all the land. Below him were the powerful nobles and bishops, the tenants-in-chief, who were granted large chunks of land, or fiefs, in exchange for their loyalty and military service. These nobles, in turn, granted smaller parcels of their land to lesser lords or knights, who pledged their own allegiance and soldiers. And at the very bottom, forming the vast base of this pyramid, were the peasants. This group made up over 90% of the population. They weren't slaves, but they weren't exactly free either. Most were serfs, tied to the land they worked. They couldn't leave, marry, or even sell their livestock without the lord's permission. In return for their labor, they received a place to live and protection from invading forces, which was a very real threat in the early Middle Ages. So, what was a typical day like for a peasant family? It started before sunrise. There was no snooze button on your phone, just the crowing of a rooster. The entire family, including the children, would head out to the fields. Their lives revolved around the agricultural calendar. In spring, they'd be plowing and planting crops like wheat, rye, oats, and barley. Summer was for haymaking and weeding, and autumn was the crucial harvest season. Everyone worked, from the youngest child capable of scaring birds away to the oldest grandparent who could still mend tools. The work was grueling, back-breaking labor, done with simple tools like wooden plows, scythes, and sickles. The concept of a weekend didn't exist. The only days off were religious holidays and festivals, which were eagerly anticipated and celebrated with whatever food and drink they could afford. Now let's talk about where they lived. Forget the quaint, charming cottages you see in movies. A peasant's home was usually a 1- or 2-room hut, often shared with their animals during the cold winter months for extra warmth. These houses were built from whatever materials were local and cheap. Wood, wattle and daub, which is a mix of woven lattice, clay and straw, and a thatched roof. There were no glass windows, just small openings with wooden shutters. Smoke from the central fire pit, used for both cooking and heating, would fill the small space before escaping through a hole in the roof. It was dark, smoky, and crowded. Furniture was minimal: a simple table, a few stools, and a communal bed, which was often just a straw-filled mattress on the floor for the whole family. Privacy was a luxury they couldn't even imagine. And what about their diet? It was simple and monotonous. The main staple was bread, but not the fluffy white loaf you'd buy today. It was a dark, heavy bread made from rye or barley, often gritty from the millstone. This was supplemented with a thick vegetable stew or pottage cooked over the fire all day. It contained whatever was available from their small garden patch: peas, beans, onions, and cabbage. Meat was a rare treat, usually reserved for feast days. While they might raise a pig or some chickens, these were often owed to the lord as part of their rent. Foraging in the lord's woods for extra food or hunting game was strictly forbidden and could result in severe punishment. For a drink, they had water, milk, or more commonly, weak ale or cider, as it was often safer to drink than unpurified water, while the peasantry formed the backbone of society. So let's not forget about life in the growing towns and cities, especially during the High and Late Middle Ages. Urban life offered a different kind of existence. Cities were bustling, crowded, and often chaotic places. They were centers of trade and craft. Here you'd find skilled artisans like blacksmiths, weavers, bakers, and carpenters. These craftsmen were organized into powerful guilds. Guilds were like a combination of a trade union and a professional association. They set standards for quality, controlled prices, and regulated who could practice a certain trade. To become a master craftsman, a young boy would start as an apprentice, living with the master and learning the trade for several years. Then he'd become a journeyman, traveling and working for other masters, before hopefully creating a masterpiece to prove his skill and be admitted to the guild as a master himself. However, medieval cities weren't exactly glamorous. Streets were narrow, unpaved, and filthy. There was no sanitation system. People threw their household waste, including human waste from chamber pots, directly into the street. You can imagine the smell, especially in the summer. This lack of hygiene was a breeding ground for disease. Sickness was a constant part of life. Medical knowledge was limited, blending practical herbal remedies with theories based on astrology and the four humours: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Illness was often seen as a punishment from God. The Black Death in the mid-14th century was a catastrophic example of how devastating disease could be, wiping out an estimated 1/3 to 1/2 of Europe's entire population. It was a trauma that reshaped society for generations. Now, we can't talk about the Middle Ages without mentioning the central role of the church. Religion wasn't just something you did on Sundays, it permeated every aspect of life, from birth to death. The local parish church was the center of the community, and the priest was a powerful figure. The church calendar dictated the rhythm of the year, with its cycle of feasts and fasts. People believed deeply in heaven, hell, and purgatory. Life on earth was seen as a temporary trial, a preparation for the afterlife. This belief provided comfort and meaning in a world full of hardship and uncertainty. Cathedrals, magnificent stone structures that took generations to build, were a testament to this profound faith. And they were the skyscrapers of their day, designed to draw the eye and the soul upward toward God. So, was it all just misery and toil? Not at all. People in the Middle Ages knew how to have fun. Community was incredibly important. Villagers worked together, celebrated together, and supported each other in times of need. Feast days were major events. There would be music, dancing, games, and storytelling. Traveling minstrels, jugglers, and performers would bring entertainment and news from the outside world. Weddings were huge celebrations. Sports like archery, wrestling, and an early, very rough version of football were popular. Life was hard, yes, but it was also filled with community, with faith, and simple joys. They found happiness not in material possessions, but in their relationships with each other and their shared culture. As we look back, it's easy to judge the past by our modern standards of comfort and hygiene. But to truly understand the people of the Middle Ages, we have to see them on their own terms. They were resilient, resourceful, and deeply spiritual people, navigating a world that was both beautiful and brutal. Their labor built the foundations of the world we live in today. From the legal systems to the universities, from the languages we speak to the cities we inhabit, the legacy of the Middle Ages is all around us. It was a time of incredible change, challenge, and creativity. It wasn't just about kings and knights. It was about the millions of ordinary people whose names we'll never know, but whose stories are written into the very fabric of history. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey back in time. I hope it gave you a richer, more nuanced picture of life in the Middle Ages. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing to the channel for more deep dives into history. Let me know in the comments what period or topic you'd like to explore next. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.